Because React is maintained by Facebook and quite a few developers over at Facebook, as well as the open source community, React is progressing really quickly. If you've ever tried to watch tutorials of React from more than maybe 2 years ago, you might notice that it's quite a bit different now than it used to be. And we even had a lesson on how React version 16.3 introduced some new lifecycle methods and also started the process of deprecating some other lifecycle methods. Well, React 16.6 was just released, and there's even more new functionality now, and a lot on the horizon for React version 17 and onward. So I thought I would make this quick lesson about some of the more modern features that you can use when you're creating React apps. And a lot of these features will work or won't work depending on which versions of ECMAScript you're supporting in your project. But as long as you're using a transpiler like Babel, you'll be able to use pretty much the most modern versions of ECMAScript and therefore use some of these things. Now, I didn't do enough research to know which of these are just experimental or which of these are definitely going to be included in React or in JavaScript in general. So you may want to just be aware that any one of these at any given point may just disappear and not work anymore. But it's pretty widely used, and I'm fairly certain a lot of this will be included inside of either React or JavaScript itself. Now, one of the major changes is that our methods can be written as arrow functions. And I believe that Scrimba may complain a little bit about this, but if you're doing this in your own environment, this should be okay. I can change this to be an arrow function, which looks like a very small change, but in fact what it does is it gives it a lexical this inside, which means that it doesn't create its own this context, but instead uses the this of its surrounding environment. Basically what this means is I no longer have to bind my methods in the constructor anymore. So I could get rid of this, and because this is an arrow function and it's using the this from the class, everything should just continue to work. So that's a really easy and convenient update that you can make to your class methods now. Another one that's a little more dramatic but also really nice is the ability to create class variables, just like we're doing here with this .state, but doing so outside of a constructor. So I can create this class property by simply saying state equals an object. And I guess in this case, to be consistent, we would have a first name, which is an empty string. And doing this essentially allows me to get rid of my constructor entirely. The last time I checked, this was still a proposal in JavaScript, but it looked like it was heading towards being included into the language as a permanent resident. So I haven't researched this recently, but just take this with a grain of salt and know that, again, this may not be included, but it's looking like it will be. We can simplify this a little bit since it's just a one-liner. So those are both really nice, fairly simple changes that we can make. I'll mention once again the changes to the lifecycle methods. I created a lesson that you've probably already gone through that talks about some of those new lifecycle methods. So if you need a refresher, go back, watch those again. But down here at the bottom, I've included some resources to some of the more either advanced React topics or brand new React topics. So for example, in React 16.3, they introduced a kind of public non-beta version of their context API. I've had a chance to play around with the context API and I'm a total convert. In fact, at vSchool, we have opted to drop Redux in our curriculum and opt instead for using the context API. And there's a number of reasons to do so. That doesn't mean that Redux no longer has a place, but for our purposes, the context API does everything we want, and it's quite a bit simpler to learn. And then there's some advanced React topics such as error boundaries, render props, higher order components. All of these can be found directly inside the React docs, which you can see all of the links here just go directly to the React docs. And in fact, in the menu bar, they're all part of an advanced React subsection. That would be a really great resource for learning more. I've also included here a link to the React Router homepage. The React Router is a great way to make single-page applications using a very declarative library, which is React Router. It's very widely adopted and used in most larger applications that are single-page applications. And then at the time of this recording, these topics, React Hooks, React Lazy, Memo, and Suspense, are all brand new additions to React. I haven't looked too much into Lazy and Memo, but I know Suspense has to do with asynchronous loading, and Hooks have to do with a way of essentially including and modifying state in a functional component. And in fact, if you look at some of these changes that React is making, it's looking like they're heading towards a place where React will almost completely be written in functional components, and class-based components will not officially be deprecated. I think they even say in their docs that there's no plans to remove class-based components, but it seems pretty clear that they're moving in a direction that they are encouraging the use of functional components more and more. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to update this course to include some more topics as they become released and as I become more familiar with them. But for now, just know that React is changing constantly, and it's always a good idea to be checking the change log, to be engaged in your community and watching for these changes, because it can be really beneficial to you and your career to be up to date on the most advanced and most modern React features.